I'm so proud of my wife and my father for how they've handled all of last year. My children have managed brilliantly as well.
Catherine is in remission now.
Yes.
One early morning last summer, Catherine dropped a bombshell that shook the British public to its core. Prince Louis and Princess Charlotte had long been adored for their bright smiles and cheerful appearances in public, the kind that made cameras and crowds fall instantly in love. But behind those innocent, perfect expressions, emotions had been quietly simmering, hidden so deeply that almost no one could imagine them, until Catherine stepped forward and made a heartfelt announcement about her children that would leave everyone stunned. The morning outside Kensington Palace carried a strange, electric stillness, unlike anything anyone had expected. Normally, the chaos of tourists, flashing cameras, palace staff rushing here and there, it all felt predictable, almost comforting in its repetition. People had gathered out of habit, expecting the usual routine. Maybe a quick wave through a car window, a rushed nod, someone slipping quietly through a side entrance. But today, the air was thick, charged with a tension that everyone felt deep down before they could even name it. A handful of reporters were already on site, cameras poised, notebooks open. But even they weren't prepared for what came next. Catherine stepped forward. No royal fanfare, no music, no perfectly choreographed spectacle, nothing like the images people had been trained to expect. Seriously, nothing. No uniformed escorts walking in perfect formation. No polished limousine gliding to the mark. No aides subtly guiding her. No signals flashing between handlers. The reason behind this choice would stun observers everywhere. She simply walked, quietly, from one of the palace doors and kept going until she stood right there, fully visible to the world, unguarded and alone. And that walk alone carried a weight that instantly settled over everyone present. Her clothing was simple, familiar, and stripped of ceremony. Her face told the story of a sleepless night, a struggle with emotions too powerful to ignore. There was a quiet strain in her eyes, the kind that only forms when someone has been holding back feelings that could no longer be contained. Her posture was steady but far from rigid. Any observer could sense the tug-of-war inside her, between the role she had been trained to embody and the personal truth she now had to reveal. Palace staff lingered at the entrance, frozen in uncertainty, unsure whether to step forward or simply watch in awe. No one moved closer, no one stepped back. They seemed unsure if they were witnessing a rehearsed appearance or something raw and entirely unscripted. Royal protocol leaves almost no room for improvisation. Every statement, every photograph, every single step is typically mapped out in advance. Yet here, the confusion in the staff's faces made it crystal clear. This moment belonged entirely to her. Reporters, the seasoned ones who had spent decades observing the monarchy, picked up immediately on the missing cues. No briefing notes, no whispers of guidance, no subtle management of the scene, nothing. That absence shouted louder than any press release ever could. It signaled something unprecedented was about to unfold, something that would etch itself in public memory for years to come. According to one veteran journalist covering the royal family for over 20 years, the atmosphere felt like a scene that would rewrite public memory forever. This was no routine announcement about charity projects or ceremonial duties. This was Catherine, standing in front of the world, exposing herself without the palace shield, taking a risk that carried profound meaning. The monarchy thrives on controlled appearances. Stepping outside that control is recognized instantly as an act of emotional urgency, one that only a few had dared to display before. Catherine approached the microphone set up for palace press briefings, and the backdrop only amplified the moment. Behind her, visible through the windows, was the royal nursery, the private heart of the palace where children play, learn, laugh, and grow. It wasn't staged, but it created an incredibly powerful visual. The connection to that room tied her forthcoming words to family and childhood, rather than duty and protocol. Her expression hinted at the difficulty of the step she was about to take. For years, she had been trained to maintain flawless composure under every circumstance. Royal expectations of women have always revolved around grace, control, and perfect restraint, perfectly captured in staged photographs and rehearsed events. But now, composure looked different. It wasn't about perfection anymore. It was about strength through vulnerability. This was the first sign that she would speak, not from the demands of institution, but from deep, personal conviction. The lack of formal preparation shifted the energy completely. No one in the crowd cheered or shouted. They instinctively understood that this was a moment demanding quiet attention, a moment that belonged fully to Catherine herself, raw, emotional, and unforgettable. Reporters stayed silent. They didn't ask a single question. Cameras adjusted their lenses with soft mechanical clicks that somehow sounded louder than usual, echoing across the courtyard like tiny warnings. According to palace correspondents, Catherine had spent most of her public life carefully avoiding unnecessary emotional drama. She preferred to build trust through steady, consistent behavior rather than grand gestures or attention-grabbing moments. She rarely sought the spotlight for herself. That's what made the significance of this moment unmistakable. When someone who shuns spectacle deliberately steps into the center of it, the message becomes impossible to ignore. She drew in a slow, deliberate breath that seemed to still every thought swirling inside her. At that instant, Catherine stood not as a royal figure bound by protocol, but as a mother confronting a reality that could no longer be hidden from the world. The children whose windows loomed behind her were no longer abstract symbols of future duty. They were living, breathing individuals carrying pressures that had already begun leaving visible marks. The public hadn't yet heard the full story, but its outline was becoming clear as she prepared to speak. The world had no idea how far this moment would reach, how deeply personal truths revealed in this courtyard could challenge centuries of tradition and the carefully guarded interior life of the monarchy. What would follow would pull attention not only to Catherine herself, but also to the quiet, protective walls of the nursery behind her. It would show how childhood within royalty carries a weight few could ever imagine, and so her words were about to open a door. Behind that door stood her children, and the reality of everything they had been carrying, leading into the next part of this story. Keep watching, because things are about to get a lot more intense. When Catherine finally spoke that day, the world had braced for a polished, rehearsed message, something neatly prepared and refined. Instead, what they heard was raw, heartfelt, and unlike anything expected. She spoke as someone who had carried the quiet weight of her children's lives, revealing that the polished image presented to the public did not reflect the reality within palace walls. The world had always seen George, Charlotte, and Louis smiling at public celebrations and in official photographs, coordinated outfits, perfect posture, cheerful faces. It all looked effortless. But Catherine explained that those carefully curated moments were only the surface. Behind the smiles, there were hidden struggles the public had never been allowed to see. The daily lives of the royal children ran on strict schedules, beginning early and ending late. Every lesson, every outing, every conversation with adults was closely monitored. Their behavior was subtly shaped from the moment they woke, leaving almost no room for true spontaneity. The palace environment functioned like a measurement system. How they moved, how they responded, how they smiled, how they carried themselves, everything observed, everything noted. Catherine revealed that this wasn't just about politeness or education, it was about training them to embody a role. There was almost no space for them to simply be children. George carried the heaviest weight as the eldest. Constant reminders, direct or indirect, reinforced that he was the future of the monarchy. Even at just 10 years old, he could feel the immense pressure of a role defined long before his birth. Research shows that children raised in environments with constant, unyielding expectations can experience heightened anxiety, especially when those expectations feel fixed and unavoidable. Catherine revealed that George had begun asking questions no child should have to ask. He worried about disappointing people. He worried about being watched constantly. He worried that his entire future had already been decided for him. His smile in photographs sometimes became a practiced performance rather than a natural expression of joy. And if that seems heartbreaking, wait until you hear about Charlotte. Charlotte faced a different kind of challenge. Naturally confident and expressive, she had always shown a strong sense of self from a young age. She loved picking her own clothes and speaking her mind during family moments. But in the palace environment, independence was carefully managed. An unspoken effort shaped her into a supportive figure rather than a bold one, encouraging grace and cooperation above all else. Catherine began to notice subtle shifts. When Charlotte played alone, she radiated energy and life. But in the presence of staff or tutors, her posture and body language changed, revealing the weight of invisible rules pressing down on her. She became cautious. She watched every word, every gesture. Catherine recognized that her daughter was learning to filter herself, shaping her reactions not out of personal choice, but because of societal expectation. Louis, the youngest, felt the pressure in a completely different way. He became aware of cameras at an age when most children are barely conscious of their own reflections. From as early as 2, photographers would appear, sometimes dozens at a time, snapping relentlessly, capturing every expression, every tiny gesture. At first, he didn't understand the attention, the flashes, or the sudden crowding of strangers. But as he grew older, he began associating crowds and cameras with unease. Catherine noticed subtle signs. He would grip her hand tightly whenever they faced public settings. In private moments, he would quietly ask whether cameras would be present whenever leaving the house. Child development studies show that repeated exposure to overwhelming environments can change how children approach new experiences, often replacing natural curiosity with caution, and Catherine could see this unfolding before her eyes. Louis was beginning to perceive the outside world not as a place to explore, but as a space to brace against. Yet that was not even the wildest part. What struck Catherine most was the emotional restraint embedded within the family's traditions. Children were taught to suppress visible signs of distress, to stay composed no matter how tired or overwhelmed they felt during ceremonies and public appearances. She explained that this self-restraint had started becoming instinctive. There were fewer bursts of laughter, fewer spontaneous questions, fewer moments where raw emotion could emerge without judgment. Royal biographers have long documented that emotional control has been expected of royal children for generations, but Catherine realized the effect was becoming tangible before her eyes. These expectations were shaping her children even before they had fully formed a sense of themselves. The change didn't happen suddenly. It emerged slowly, through subtle adjustments in posture, tone, and facial expression. Catherine noticed George pausing before reacting to good news, as if weighing whether the response was appropriate. Charlotte began to check whether she was standing correctly, mindful of every nuance. Louis, who once ran freely across palace lawns, now moved carefully whenever others were nearby. Natural movement was being replaced by learned, cautious responses. Tutors and advisors played a crucial role in these adjustments. They were not unkind, but their focus remained on shaping the children into figures ready for public life. Their guidance emphasized consistency, correction, and tradition, rarely fostering emotional expression or encouraging creativity that strayed from expected norms. Catherine realized that these adults acted as guardians of legacy, not nurturers of individuality. Instead of growing a personal identity, the children were being molded into symbolic figures, representing something larger than themselves. Their unique traits were softened, reshaped, or quietly set aside to fit a predetermined role. Catherine understood that this was nothing new. It had been the experience of many generations, including their father, but seeing the joy dim in her children's eyes made the reality painfully clear. Childhood is fleeting, a time when imagination soars and confidence is pure. These years do not last forever. Catherine recognized that her children's formative years were slipping away faster than she had anticipated. While the world admired them, that admiration came at a cost. Their childhoods were being sculpted in service to the royal image. Every polished public moment was achieved through private emotional labor. As she spoke, Catherine made it clear she could no longer allow her children to exist within a system that prioritized public perception over emotional well-being. She acknowledged the importance the world placed on the continuity of the monarchy, but she insisted that such continuity should never come at the expense of a child's ability to shape their own future. This revelation exposed more than palace pressures. It revealed a deep conflict between the private needs of a family and the demands of an institution centuries old. Catherine's decision to speak openly marked the beginning of a shift that no one had anticipated. It set the stage for an emotional reckoning. The true impact of her words would shock many. Stay tuned. When Catherine's message reached the public, the effect was immediate and profoundly emotional across Britain and beyond. Her voice stirred memories that had never truly faded. People began to recall another woman who had once stood in front of the same institution, striving to protect her sons from the same invisible burden. The comparison between Catherine and Princess Diana formed naturally in the minds of millions. It wasn't about physical resemblance or style. It was about courage, vulnerability, and the kind of pain that leaves a lasting mark on history. Diana had once spoken openly about the isolation she experienced within the palace walls. Catherine's words, delivered years later, seemed to pick up that thread, proving that some struggles had never truly ended and that the challenges of royal motherhood were far from over, echoing through generations. Old footage of Diana began circulating again across television and social media. Clips from interviews where she had shared her deepest fears and desires, wanting her children to grow up feeling loved, not pressured, were replayed thousands of times. The public couldn't help but draw parallels between Diana's fight for emotional honesty and Catherine's heartfelt plea for the well-being of her own children. Even younger audiences, too young to remember Diana's life or her tragic death in 1997, found themselves moved by the echoes of history repeating itself behind the palace doors, a pattern that resonated with hearts everywhere. Inside, William felt a flood of emotion. He had always carried quiet, personal memories of his mother, memories rarely shared or discussed. Catherine's speech reopened those feelings, revealing the same kind of bravery and uncompromising honesty that had defined Diana's final years for him. This wasn't just about public reaction. It was about history repeating itself in vivid, painful detail. He remembered what it was like to be watched by the world while his family struggled behind closed doors. Now, he feared his own children could face the same weight if the cycle persisted, the same pressures and invisible burdens that had once haunted him. Public sentiment swung almost instantly in Catherine's favour. Within 24 hours, her name dominated global news cycles. International newspapers placed her image on front pages, hailing her as the royal voice of empathy. Parenting forums, psychologists, and social commentators began dissecting the emotional cost of raising children in an environment where every action is scrutinised. Hashtags carrying her name trended worldwide as people expressed admiration for her honesty and courage. The tone of the conversation had shifted dramatically, from superficial royal gossip to meaningful social reflection. Social media amplified her words into a global dialogue. Videos of her standing alone outside the palace reached millions within hours, shared on platforms like TikTok and Instagram, often paired with poignant captions and emotional music. Journalists described it as the most significant royal statement since Diana's televised interviews, emphasizing how rare it was for a royal figure to speak with such heartfelt authenticity. King Charles's reaction, however, was far from favorable. According to royal observers, he saw Catherine's public statement as more than an act of honesty. It was, in his view, a breach of discipline and a challenge to the carefully maintained order that had guided the monarchy for centuries. In his mind, private struggles were meant to stay private, particularly within a family whose authority relied on composure and continuity. Behind closed doors, he expressed concern that Catherine's decision to speak openly could weaken public respect for the crown. His advisors agreed, cautioning that empathy could easily be misinterpreted as criticism. Once the narrative slipped from the palace's control, regaining influence would be nearly impossible. Camilla, who had spent 2 decades cultivating her public image and winning over a skeptical public, saw Catherine's sudden rise in global sympathy as a direct threat. She understood the fragility of popularity and recognized how quickly the royal narrative could shift. Within palace corridors, subtle tension grew. Though the two women were never open rivals, their roles in the public imagination now directly contrasted, one representing tradition and duty, the other representing emotion and change, setting the stage for unprecedented rivalry in public perception. Palace advisors scrambled to regain control. Communication experts drafted strategies to downplay Catherine's message, suggesting statements emphasizing family unity or releasing staged photographs showing the children smiling and relaxed to soften the story. Others proposed highlighting the king's role as a supportive father and grandfather, but none of these efforts carried weight. The public had already shifted attention to Catherine as the emotional heart of the monarchy. Every attempt to redirect focus only underscored her authenticity. William found himself trapped between two worlds. On one side lay loyalty to the institution that had defined his life. On the other, loyalty to his wife, who had dared to speak truthfully about the pressures inside that same institution. The tension built quietly, yet inexorably, until silence was no longer an option within the private halls of Clarence House. William and the King faced each other in a conversation thick with the tension of generations. The atmosphere wasn't formal, it was raw, charged with emotion. The King wanted a clear assurance that William would help repair the family's public image by aligning with palace strategy. But William couldn't give that promise. He understood that to disavow Catherine publicly would not only betray her, but also betray his own memories of his mother, the lessons of loss, and the pain he had carried silently for years. The argument revealed something deeper than simple disagreement. It exposed the fundamental divide between personal truth and the rigid demands of royal survival. Charles had been raised in a world where duty always outweighed personal feeling. William, however, had witnessed firsthand what such restraint could destroy in a family. Their perspectives, shaped by different generations, collided in that room with quiet intensity. The confrontation didn't end with raised voices. It ended in silence, the kind that carries weight, permanence, and finality. For William, the decision became unmistakably clear. He would protect his wife and children from the same emotional patterns that had shaped his own childhood. He knew the cost of royal life had always been emotional distance, and he refused to let that distance pass down another generation. Privately, he began withdrawing from certain palace routines, choosing instead to spend more time at their Windsor residence, away from constant oversight. Friends close to the couple later observed that this period marked a turning point. William's focus shifted from maintaining public appearances to safeguarding private safety. Behind the polished calm of official engagements, tension thickened. Senior courtiers attempted to manage the optics, but whispers of internal division inevitably leaked into the media. Stories surfaced suggesting disagreements over how to handle Catherine's growing influence. Palace sources tried to deny them, but the pattern of subtle contradictions only made the tension more believable to the public. The monarchy, long reliant on the illusion of unity, now faced visible cracks that couldn't be ignored. Thank you for staying with us. Do you think Catherine's revelation was the right decision? Share your thoughts in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more royal updates. And don't forget to click the video on your screen next. You won't want to miss what comes next.